we speak with West Australian Upper House Member of Parliament Louise Kingston about the recent gun rally in Perth, her plans to help shooters, and why we're recommending that West Australian shooters vote for her at the upcoming state election.
What is the fella's name on third base?
What is the fella's name on second base?
I'm not asking you who's on second.
Who's on first?
I don't know. Third base.
Welcome to the Go Use Australia podcast. It's the podcast for Australian shooters who just want the political interference taken out of shooting.
Welcome to another episode of Gun Use Australia, brought to you by Politics Reloaded and Gun Traders Australia. And I have with me again Louise Kingston, who's the member of the Legislative Council in Southwest Region in WA. How you doing, Louise?
Yeah, morning. Great. Yeah, fabulous day over here in WA.
Lovely. Everybody keeps saying that. I want to talk to you about a couple of things. One is the recent gun rally that was held in Perth, and then I want to talk about the upcoming election in terms of what shooters need to know, what to do, what not to do, because it's pretty complex, but I think we can probably put a fairly simple story to them. So you're aware, obviously, because you attended the gun rally that was held in the Supreme Court Gardens on the 8th of February, and you made a presentation there. How did you find the day?
Oh, gee, it was just amazing. So I got there early and the car park was already full, and I was like, oh my goodness gracious, this is just going to be awesome. So it was hot, it was sticky, very, very sticky day, but the people just, the groundswell was just amazing. And yeah, that people were just so happy to see us, were so happy to be heard. Majority of them is what I heard on the day was, no, we don't feel like anybody's been listening to us. So yeah, it was really fantastic.
Really, I was to protest the gun laws that Labor has introduced, or actually put into effect in Western Australia, but also I think to the Liberal Party, which was capitulating quite a bit. Not all the whole the Liberal Party, but there were some Liberal Party members who, basically the leadership, I think, sold out on shooters and sided with Labor to support the gun law. So it was equally a message to both sides via a rally 1 month before a state election. Now, can you just tell me a little bit about the political importance of that? I mean, there's been a few people who've asked, what was the point? Why do a rally? What does it mean to politicians and parties in the lead up to an election?
We know that a stand against something in good numbers gets the government's attention. Now, if we go back to the Aboriginal Cultural Heritage Laws, that took a petition to actually make the government overturn it. I had long espoused the value of bringing everybody together. I mean, we've got in excess of 90,000 law-abiding firearms owners in Western Australia. The multiplying factor of that, could be as many as 300,000 voters at the next election. Now, the minister's not going to take notice unless it's actually in front of him. So I had suggested that we do this quite some time ago, and the decision by the firearms groups, rightly so, or wrongly so, who knows, they decided not to. So when this opportunity came up, I spoke to the organisers and I said, look, if we can bring everybody together and we can really show us, have us show us strength, then that's really going to get whoever the next minister is. Because if we get a change of government, it says to Liberals, oh, look at this, these guys are really genuine about what they believe in. And we can all come together and we can all say, hey, we matter. And it's very important. These days it's very, very hard to get the eye of a minister or a politician at the best of times. So yeah, that's what we were trying to do.
So I think it's important to understand too that whilst Labor holds a commanding lead in terms of the number of seats in Parliament, this is never going to be a one election strategy for shooters.
No.
They, unfortunately, groups, and I think the major parties count on this. So a lot of groups come and go. They might get revved up for an election, then they go away after the election, which means there's no enduring message. Yeah. And that's a weakness for shooters, and that's why I think after, however many decades, we've ended up in the situation that we're in.
Yeah, yes, and that's where I came in, because I suppose I've got a long-term view. I've always been a visionary, and I looked at it and I thought I drew the parallels between what we saw in Speedway in 2001, and we were faced with, sort of catastrophic collapse of Speedway due to the 9/11, and everybody goes, oh, what did 9/11 have to do with Speedway? Well, the insurances went through the roof, and, small clubs were facing increases of, 4,000 and 5,000%. And so we, as a collective and a group of, strategic and clever brains came together and went to government and said, right, well, if we can actually bring Speedway together and we can actually form a governing body, become self-regulating, do all of the track licensing and sort of new divisions and all that sort of stuff within our own area of expertise, how much better it'll be. Government funded the commencement of the WA Speedway Commission, which is still in operation today and still undertakes all of those functions. And I looked at the firearms groups, and particularly in terms of bringing that group together to be the spokesperson and lobby on behalf of firearms owners. And then I looked at it and I thought, well, actually, there's some that aren't included in that. So there's a scope there to expand on what's already been done and to bring everybody together in the same room, get all of those groups together, do a strategic audit, say, okay, well, where are a SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats, and then try and get everybody to, sort of understand the functions of what they're doing better and work together for the betterment of the users of that service. Because all of them are service providers, if you think about it. So that was my idea, and so that's what I'm sort of pushing at the moment. I've got an online forum tomorrow night for people to come and listen to my idea. They might think it's rubbish, they might say, no, we don't like that. Off you go. But yeah, I think it's got value.
We'll get on to, I think, some of the specifics of that and just your plan going forward. It's quite exciting, and I will get around to that. But in terms of the I guess the duration or the effort that has to go into this, shooters lost a lot nearly 30 years ago with the National Firearms Agreement, the attack on semi-autos. I think there were some things in there that, sure, shooters would have been happy to address if they were brought in the room, but they weren't brought in the room. They were dictated to.
Yes.
And things have been falling apart ever since. Western Australia is a signatory to the National Firearms Agreement, but doesn't comply with half the things in there, like permits to acquire and the like.
Yeah, that's correct.
But I take the view that, hey, that happened nearly 30 years ago. Another 4 years is not going to phase me. It's not going to phase the shooters who turned up there on the day, because they're in the, they're really being lined up for the new safes, the restrictions, caliber restrictions and the like. So it's what I agree. It's like herding cattle. In shooting fraternity, it's actually the same problem pretty much every state, but it's definitely, your idea of actually having that body is clearly, going to help that. What would that look like? Who would actually be in charge of that? Because one of the first things you're going to have is that question. Is this going to be another umbrella group for people who want to be the kingpin, or how's this going to run?
I am proposing the model of it, and then bring all of the firearms groups and people together, and then they actually decide what it looks like. Form a steering committee to start with, made up of a sort of range of different users, and I'm talking about WA Farmers Federation, all of those other organisations. Anybody that puts their hands on a firearm, being able to actually decide their future, rather than government doing it, who don't. And it's speaking to the beat coppers, the operational police, they don't want to be doing this. They want to be fighting crime. They don't want to be out there, sort of busting people for something that, they did 15, 20, 25 years ago, and they're now being tortured for it, for want of a better word. And, so if the firearms community can come together, prove that they've got a structure that can self-regulate, I am just about positive government is going to say, oh, this is fantastic. You still report to government. The Speedway Commission still reports to government. So I'm not saying there's no government involvement in it, but you work together, and then you're able to develop, and you're able to do really exciting stuff in your own sport.
There have been a couple of attempts to have what we call firearm consultative committees established in various places. Victoria's got one. I've been on it. I get the feeling, though, that the government will speak to it when it only wants to. It won't include it when it comes to policy development. Basically, it'll go to it when it's policy output. Which, but that's not to say it can't work. It can work, but it's going to require, good faith.
Yeah, and I think the beautiful part about it is we've got a model already. Perhaps Victoria and Western Australia was the leaders in the Speedway Commission as well. So this is why it's a really good state to start it in, because we've got that model that's already already being developed, and it pretty much fits just about exactly for the firearms community as well. It's you've got speedway tracks, you've got ranges, you've got different disciplines within the sport, you've got other users of it. So yeah, there's a lot of similarities between it.
Okay, so they're the pluses of the rally. There were a couple of minuses. Okay, the sprinklers came out probably at the worst time, as I understand it.
I don't know. It was beautiful. It cooled us down.
Oh well, that's right.
So hot. Yeah,
this didn't matter, but you can see by the crowd, who was there. It was very, as we predicted. There's a really good crew that turned up. There were people though who went into this sort of saying, "Oh no, this is going to be the worst thing that's happened. It's going to end up on the news. With troublemakers. There's going to be Nazi saluters. There's going to be CCTV all around recording people. People are going to be wanted, by police." It was pretty amazing what some people in the shooting community were saying about this thing, and quite deliberately trying to dissuade people from going.
Yeah. Look, I had so many phone calls telling me not to go. There's so much risk to everybody, blah, blah, blah. And I said to everybody, right, I'm going for a reason, and it is to present this idea. I got all their email addresses, sent it to them, and overwhelmingly I got back, "Oh, this is a great idea." And I said, well, this is what I want to speak to the masses about. The other thing was that I said to them, "You're cowering in the corner. There's 90,000 of you cowering in the corner going, 'Please, Minister, don't hit me again.' You can only change these things by shows of strength." The firearms petition that was compiled while we were in government, over 30,000 signatures. You've got to keep that momentum going. You've got to keep saying to whoever our next government is going to be, whoever that next police minister is going to be, we matter. And you can only do that by doing that as a show of strength. And then, like with an idea like mine, we're working together to solve our problems ourselves. You work with us, and, we can come up with something really workable. And that's really what I'd like to see happen out of this.
Yeah, and just note that there were people who travelled some very long distances to get there. I think I heard a story about one guy for 15 hours to get there. Another one flew down from, I think it was Pilbara or somewhere. It was quite amazing. Now, you spoke at the rally, and Shooters Union will be releasing a video of the speakers, so we'll let people see that in due course. So, Louise, out of this, I understand you've got a plan that will help. It is aimed to try to help shooters through, I think, the next few years, whilst the whole question of policy and firearm laws can be revisited, probably, depending on whether we've got a friendly or unfriendly government going forward. But what is your plan that you would like to table?
Okay, so the first one is that I want to call on the government of whoever the new government is, to undertake a full review of the firearms legislation. So basically pause it for 6 months, put in a grandfathering clause that, there are no changes or transference to the new laws and regulations until somebody's licence changes. So basically it stays the same until they buy a new firearm or, change the category of what they're doing or whatever, and then they will transition into whatever that new law and regulation looks like after a full review.
Okay, and my understanding is that you're talking here about a consultation that involves the recommendation for the Law Reform Commission report.
That's correct.
Which
yes.
came out, and basically this comes at no cost to the government.
No. No, in fact, it's a huge saving because we know at the moment the amount of police hours that are going into actually, police licensing in particular, writing all the letters. The law hasn't even come in and they're already writing letters to people. And then we've got the operational police that are having to go out and actually confiscate the firearms and, deal with all that stuff. So we can put tens of thousands of man hours back into the police force to fight crime, which is what they should be doing, and tens of thousands of dollars in savings.
Yep. I think there'd be a lot of shooters, perhaps like myself, who would actually say, no, what we really want is a complete scrapping of what we've got and something new to replace it. I know the Nationals were talking about repealing the Act. They haven't really said what they would go back to. I have said previously that if you went back to the old Act, it's still it's better than what you got, but it's not a proper rewrite because you have to go back to the NFA. And I don't like the NFA, but the NFA at least would bring Western Australia on with other states, and it would get rid of 80% of the problems. So, but the problem is there won't be the political will to do that in Western Australia. On the other side of the election, you're basically having to change the attitude of Labor and Liberal parties. I can't see that happening. I think that's why you're suggesting this is a bit of a pathway, at least in the short term, so that the whole question of firearms policy can go through a proper review and be dealt with in the longer term.
That's correct. Yes. Yep.
You also have been very active in getting your message out, and I'm going to show an article which appeared in the West Australian newspaper. And basically what this shows is what you just said, which is you're after fair reform of firearm regulations. Talking about the rally, and look, thank you for that. That's a really strong message to put to out there. And there was also a letter to the editor that you had published recently, which is this one here, where again you're talking about consultation. And I think that's where it all starts. So you can't really talk about gun laws, good, bad, indifferent, until you start speaking with the people who it affects.
That's exactly right, and that's what we didn't see. Again, another example of the Labor's massive majority in Western Australia ramming through legislation without due consideration, without due consultation, not understanding the users of that service, because they're service providers as well, and we talk about mental health. We're always talking about mental health. And what I got overwhelmingly from my visits to the various gun clubs was how much connectivity there was there, how much comradeship and mateship and, looking after each other, keeping an eye on each other. And this is what they were most worried about, was not being able to undertake what they've been doing, to help them mentally. And I don't know, just for me, I don't understand, this keeping the public safe. And yet then we have the minister and the police commissioner undertaking a stunt that wouldn't have passed the pub test, let alone being safe or legal. And they talk about public safety, and they're doing that themselves. And I just think, what's it all about? If somebody can tell me, I'm not really sure, to be quite honest.
About the demonstration, we're using a 50 caliber rifle.
That's right,
the Jarrah range, which we covered, where the Pierce RAF base had to be closed down for a couple of hours, or at least the airspace had to be shut down, all for a photo opportunity.
It's just diabolical. It really is. It just didn't make any sense.
And this whole thing about mental health is interesting. Anybody who's involved in the shooting sports will know that being a member of a club, going to competitions, sure, you've got your serious competitors, out there who want to, the A grade, B grade shooters who really just want to go to win the prizes. But half the people who go actually just like to, it's a day out for them. Yesterday I went down to a shoot at a large club near me, an annual event. I didn't do that well, but I had a good day. Caught up with people I've known for years, had a bit of a chat. And by the way, I had a shoot, but then I went home and I'm looking forward to doing it again too. That's why I do it, because it's actually it's a weekend away. It's like going fishing where you might not catch anything, but catching something would be a bonus, but it's not the only reason why you go away.
Yeah, and there's so many more elements to it just from that sort of thing. It's the conservation groups that get together to manage our feral animals. We're facing massive problems with that in Western Australia based on these new laws. It's farmers being able to manage the pest and vermin on their properties. And the ridiculous limitations on the size of the properties, the property letters now. This is going to affect people eventually in the city. When you've got wild pigs wandering onto your front lawn, you're all going to say, oh well, now we know who was doing that and why they were so important.
What you just said has led me, it was a good segue, thank you very much for it, into the voting at the state election. What I'm going to show you is something that goes on about that issue that you just mentioned, and that is preferences from Labor. This is an example of one of the many how to vote cards that Labor has had registered with the WA Electoral Commission, but you can see that they're recommending the vote one Labor, fine, but then people go straight to the Greens, they go to the Cannabis Party, and then they go to the Animal Justice Party. So anybody who votes Labor or follows the how to vote card is voting against feral pest control, hunting. So losing your guns is one thing, but actually directly shutting down your activity, what you do as a farmer, etc., that can be very much affected by the outcome of this election. That's what this is about.
The upper house, of course, we go to a statewide electorate at the next election, which means that we will have an additional upper house member. So it's going from 36 to 37. The above the line, you can still put your one above the line, but of course there's no preferences. So if you don't put your preferences above the line, potentially your vote is going to be extinguished. So we formed a group of independents. We've got similarities but a lot of differences as well. So there's 5 of us, and we had to do that. We started off with 11. So the attrition was 6, and we ended up with 5, just enough to get over the line. We each needed 250 individual declarations minimum. I ended up with over 400, which was fantastic because, I've got huge support from the firearms community, which is really lovely. And then, yes, basically what we're promoting is we've got a box above the line. So do your preferences, us one, whoever you want your preferences to go to if you want them to flow. And then secondly, doing 1 to 20 as a minimum below the line. So do your research, work out who the candidates are that support the firearms community, and then number those 1 to 20 below the line.
So the box they're looking for on the ballot, on the upper house ballot paper for you, what's it called? Is it called Independence?
Yes, it's Group M. So we're calling ourselves Group M Power. So we're going to empower the voters to make a difference. So that's above the line, way off to the right. So I think we're the second last column, which is not so bad because it's reasonably easy to find. Second last from the right. Much smaller ballot paper because about a third, I think it is, of the candidates this time, due to the changes in those rules. There's only 10 independents this time. Last time there was 49. So that's a reduction, a massive reduction you can see in terms of these changes. Once again, that Labor rammed through due to their majority.
Okay, so put 1 above the line for Group M, then you might go 2 to whoever you want, whether it's, One Nation, Liberal, National Party, whatever it is. So you want a number, or you can go below the line, and to do that, you can actually go for particular individuals such as yourself. So you can put vote, 1 for Louise Kingston. You have to do a minimum of 20.
20, that's correct. Yeah. So you should be able to find 20 very supportive candidates there for the firearms changes. So I think that's the best way to go. And then your vote completely counts as well. It's preference correctly.
It doesn't take long to count to 20. One of my big arguments is that people, that spend 10 minutes going to they'll leave it voting till sort of 5 p.m. on the day, and they think, I have to vote before I go home and do whatever. So they spend 5-10 minutes going to the local school. They spend another 5 minutes lining up to get their cards off to the booth, and they don't think. They tend to just vote out of habit, when I'm asking people to slow down, you've already spent 20, 30 minutes of your day to do this. This is important. This is going to affect the future of what you do. Spend 2 minutes.
Yeah.
1 through to 20. Surely you can do that. Then you can get on with your life. You can
Yes.
put the thing in, because, as you know, people either don't think about who they're voting for. It's just habit, or they might have an old habit that they're aware of. I voted Labor. I voted Labor because my father voted Labor, sort of thing. And that's not going to produce the outcome you want.
No, and if people think back to what we've faced over the last 5 years, in Western Australia under Labor, they have to get engaged. That outcome was probably one of the worst outcomes we could have ever seen in terms of political fairness and democracy. If people aren't engaged now, they're never going to be engaged. So let's hope we see a really solid change to voting below the line this time. It's easier. It matters to you because, it's going to make a difference to your life, and you are in control of that. Every person out there can choose their own preferences, and always have been able to, but this time it's a lot easier.
I've been critical of the Liberal Party leadership, but there's a couple of other people who are probably worth looking for below the line. One is Steve Thomas
Yes.
from the Liberal Party, who I've interviewed, and you also have somebody else you want to mention for the Liberal Party.
Yes, Nick Garan has been very supportive. He didn't vote for the legislation at the time, and he made that very clear why, because it was such a dog's breakfast. He chose to abstain and made a protest. So yes, he's another one that, and he's a good performer in Parliament. Yes, and he's right across all of these issues. He was the presenter of the petition, which Rick Mazza, former Shooters and Fishers, was the proponent for that, which got over 30,000 signatures, the biggest petition ever in the history of the West Australian Parliament. And yes, it was totally and utterly ignored.
Which is the beauty of why you can vote below the line, because you can actually go for the individuals you want. It's not a fait accompli. People might think, I'm just one voter, I can't make a difference. I'll tell you what, there are elections, as you know, that have been decided on less than a handful of votes.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly.
I think it was a Queensland seat, not the last election this year, but the one before, where the Labor candidate got up by 9 votes. So 5 people had voted differently. 5 shooters have actually voted differently. There would have been a different mix. Now, I did also mention the size of the majority that Labor has. 53 seats to 6 held by the Liberal Party and National Party. Some people have taken the view that, what's the point? I argue that, in fact, a lot of those seats are very marginal. A lot of the seats that Labor holds, they're held by certainly less than 10%. And as you know, it doesn't really take an awful lot sometimes for the mood of the electorate to change, and you can suddenly they can find themselves don't have to be wiped out, but they can certainly lose a huge chunk of those seats.
Yeah, and there's been quite a few redistributions as well, which has made some seats even more marginal. So Albany's going to be a really, really interesting one to watch. Traditionally held for a long time by Liberal, then held by a very charismatic Labor member, and which has now fallen to he retired, and the new members. This is her first term of government, and the Liberal candidate down there is strong. He's connected. He's awakening the quiet ones that have just been sitting back watching. He's got a fabulous following. So, we sort of hope that the Conservative vote will win down there, because my office is in Albany as well. I'm a Conservative politician as well. So hopefully we'll see a really strong swing back to the Liberals in Albany.
Tired of seeing red. I think I'm getting sick and tired of seeing red too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And you're talking about Tom Brough, who
Yes.
I've interviewed a couple of times in this program. Yeah, he's rock solid. He'll be in amongst our voting recommendations for the lower house.
Yeah. And he's a real person. He's a doctor in an emergency department. When you've got people like that stepping forward for politics, you've got to support people like that, because they're so connected. They're grassroots people. They know what's going on. They're the change makers that we're looking for in politics going forward.
And he didn't come out of the student unions or trade unions.
No, that's exactly right. And he's a former army medic. He's done the hard yards, and he's a terrific human being.
Okay, Louise Kingston, MLC for Southwest Region for the time being. Good luck with the election. I really, really hope you do. We see you again, and really appreciate you coming on this program again.
Thank you, Neil. It was it's fabulous to be here again.
Okay, thanks. See you later.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Gun News Australia. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast and that you're on our email list. And don't forget to check the episode notes, because that's where you'll find out how to support the show. We'll see you in the next episode of Gun News Australia, brought to you by Politics Reloaded.